So, today we're going to dive into an idea from our source material that really challenges the way we think about modern economies. We're exploring the economic principles of Islam, which is put forward as a kind of a third way for humanity.
I mean, for centuries, the world has been kind of defined by this one massive debate, right? Capitalism versus socialism. But our source material asks a really powerful question. Beyond these two giants, what's next? Is there a third option we've just been overlooking all this time?
To even start looking for an alternative, we first have to understand why these economic systems are so incredibly powerful. And that brings us to our first section, the quest for a system.
So the core idea here is that every independent nation, every society, is built on a specific philosophy. And this isn't just about money, not at all. This economic system becomes the bedrock for, well, everything else. How we educate our kids, how justice works, and how our politics are shaped.
This idea of a foundational system brings us right to the two models that have pretty much dominated the last few centuries, the two big competing ideologies.
Now, what's really fascinating here is how this slide breaks these two systems down. On one side, you have capitalism, where the central focus, the main goal, is protecting capital. The source argues that every single part of society is basically designed to help that capital grow and stay secure. Then on the other side, you get socialism, which really emerges as a reaction to that. It centers itself on what it calls the proletarian dictatorship, which is essentially a system where all the institutions are there to serve the interests of the working class above all else.
But here's the crucial point the source makes about both of them. After laying out socialism's approach, it hits us with this powerful conclusion. But even this system cannot address the economic woes due to injustice and tyranny. The argument being made is that, in the end, neither ideology really creates a truly just and fair society. So, if the source is saying that both of the dominant systems we have are flawed, where else are we supposed to look? And this brings us to its central idea, an overlooked third way. Now, there's a pretty common myth out there that Islam doesn't have a comprehensive economic model. But our source material says the exact opposite. It states that the Quran actually proposes a complete universal system, and it's one designed for the betterment of all humanity, which is a pretty sharp contrast to systems that focus on just one class or one abstract idea like capital. And get this isn't just some theory. The source really emphasizes that this system has an incredible history, having been dominant for over 1,000 years. A millennium! That makes it a proven, historically implemented model, even if it isn't widely used today. That's a track record that kind of demands our attention, you know? So what makes this historical system so different at its core? Well, according to the source, it all comes down to its philosophy. It's a truly human-centered framework. This slide just illustrates that shift perfectly. Islamic economics is defined as a system where wealth and capital serve humanity, not the other way around. The prime importance is placed on human beings and our well-being. It basically flips the script on any system where people end up serving capital. And this isn't some New Age interpretation either. The source points us to the scholar Shah Waliullah, who about 250 years ago laid out a really comprehensive moral framework for exactly this kind of system, showing how it could adapt with the times. And his approach was incredibly forward-thinking. He laid out 3 guiding principles. First, a society has to uphold its social values, its collective morality. Second, it has to embrace science and technology and adapt to new advancements. And third, and this is the big one, everything, and I mean everything, must ultimately serve the public welfare. It's a framework that's built to be both principled and flexible.
Okay, so how does this big picture philosophy actually work in practice? Let's take a look at the 4 core principles that come directly from Quranic teachings.
So, the source highlights 4 foundational pillars that guide the whole economy. First, equality, which means everyone has the same basic economic rights and access to resources. Second, natural variance, which recognizes that, hey, different efforts can lead to different outcomes, but within fair limits. Third, and this is a huge one, a prohibition of hoarding, making sure wealth doesn't just get piled up and taken out of the system. And finally, a fair balance of capital and labor, seeing them as partners, not enemies.
So let's break down what that actually means for people. The principle of equality makes sure that natural resources aren't just monopolized by one class. They belong to everybody. Fair variance allows for differences based on skill and hard work, sure, but it stops these extreme permanent class divides from forming. The prohibition on hoarding? Think of it like a pump for the economy, keeping wealth moving through society instead of just sitting in private vaults.
And finally, that balance of capital and labor fosters cooperation, creating a system where growth benefits everyone instead of it being some kind of exploitative zero-sum game.
This all sounds historically important, for sure, but what about right now? And that brings us to our final section, the call for today.
Yeah, the source material doesn't just leave this in the past. It wraps up with a very direct call for today, framed by this quote: "We need to step ahead to get rid of capitalism and solve our problems." The argument here is that these principles aren't just historical artifacts. They're presented as a potential solution to modern problems, like wealth inequality and social division.
And that leaves us with one final thought-provoking question. So just think about it. What might a modern economy, really guided by these principles of human welfare, balance, and cooperation, actually look like? It's a question worth pondering.